What's up everybody? In today's video, we're going to be talking about leaked footage of tests of the Mavic 4 Pro, as well as getting into the weeds on some of the now new specs that we have for the camera system. We're also going to be talking about firmware updates to a couple of different drones and the Osmo Action 5. So let's jump in. So I'm going to give you just a bit of fair warning here before we get into the info on the Mavic 4 Pro. I'm going to be getting real deep into the nerdy weeds on subsampling, bit rates, f-stops, and focal lengths. I've been yelled at in the past for talking too much, so now I'm just warning you, we're going to get in deep. But before we get into the news about the Mavic 4, let's talk a little bit about some firmware updates that DJI released for a couple of their products. First being the DJI Flip and the Air 3S. Now, we just got an update for the Flip, and really it's only been out for about a month or so. The Air 3S has been out since October of last year, and it has seen a couple of updates over that time. And while these updates aren't bringing any specific feature improvements, they're primarily to stability. It continues to be a positive to see DJI continue to release firmware updates in pretty quick succession, not just products that have been on the market for a couple of months, but products that are absolutely brand new. It's just exciting to see that kind of support from a manufacturer. So if you're flying either of those drones, you should absolutely be installing these updates now. These updates are separate from updates that came out that updated the Fly app, that removed geofencing, but I've got a video about that I will link here. Next, we've got a firmware update for the DJI Osmo Action 5 action camera, which has been very popular, but was initially derided for some of the issues that it had related to the throughput options and the amount of control that you had on a product that has the word Pro in its name. Now, since then, DJI has released a handful of updates that have added additional features and controls that I think have corrected most of those issues. And they've continued adding additional features and updates, with this update coming with 3 specific feature add-ons. The first being the ability in non-log profile. So this is if you're using the DJI color profile to decide whether or not you want a more neutral tone or a vivid tone to the color interpretation of the footage. So if you're looking for something that's real punched up and real vivid, go with that vivid setting, especially if you're not planning on doing any sort of video editing or color correction in post-processing. And if you're looking for more of a kind of natural neutral tone, go with the neutral setting. But if you want to really dial in the settings on that color, make sure you're shooting in log profile and editing that footage using a LUT in your NLE. And if you don't know anything about what I just said, then you should definitely be shooting in either neutral or vivid, whichever works best for you. The next feature that's been added in this update is the support for the MTP transfer protocol. I guess I just said media transfer protocol. MTP stands for Media Transfer Protocol, and it is a subset of the PTP, or the Picture Transfer Protocol. Android phones from manufacturers like Xiaomi, Oppo, and Samsung support the MTP, and it is a simpler protocol than the traditional ADB or Android Debug Bridge, but it's also traditionally slower and has a tendency to cause more utilization between the device and the phone that it's being connected to. Now, I am not an Android user, and I have not had or found myself in a situation where I've needed anything like MTP versus ADB. So I'm really kind of curious for those of you who are transferring files from something like an Osmo Action 5 to your Android phone, what would be the reason to use MTP versus ADB? Especially when dealing with large files that you're going to be getting off of something like an action camera shooting in 4K. Next in this firmware update is an update for folks who shoot a lot of underwater photography and videography using the Osmo Action 5, and specifically if you're shooting underwater with high frame rates. Now, I can tell you with experience, shooting underwater with high frame rates is a double-edged sword. Number one, it gives you the ability to slow down and smooth out the footage that you're getting, especially if you're looking at wildlife like this turtle that I got video of in Maui. Honestly, the spectacle of undersea videography is just cooler when it is in slow-mo. But unfortunately, when you do that, you also have to really increase your shutter speed to match the 180-degree rule that you would traditionally want to follow with something like 120 or 240 frames per second. And I don't know if you know this, but underwater, it's dark. So what this update does is it significantly improves how the Osmo Action 5 deals with high frame rate low light noise management in underwater scenes, making underwater videography clearer and the details easier to identify. They've also added an update to the auto start and auto stop feature for those who are shooting underwater. Again, the idea being that with small iterative improvements over time, the camera continues to add functionality and versatility depending on the different environments that you're using it. Real quick, I want to break in and talk about my Instagram giveaway. If you don't know, I'm in the process of trying to rebuild my Instagram account back to at least 1,000 followers. And the way that I'm doing that is by giving away free stuff. I get products all the time where companies ask me to review their stuff. This is a 6-inch video monitor that you're gonna see a review on the channel really soon. You've seen reviews for microphones and tripods and NAS systems and just all sorts of things. Well, I don't really have room for all of that, and I wanna give it to you. So go ahead and check out this video. I'll put a link above and down below. Check out that video, follow its instructions, go over to my Instagram, follow me there, like all my photos, right? Give me the engagement that's gonna do the thing that Instagram needs, and then comment on this video that you did it, and I will be randomly giving away a lot of this gear. Check out that video for details. Now back to info on the Mavic 4. All right, next let's talk about the Mavic 4 Pro. I've been doing tons of leak videos. We've been learning lots of things from all over the place. I wanna say thank you to folks like Jasper Ellens and Igor Bogdanov over on Twitter. I will link their profiles down below. Go ahead and check them out. But the new details that we are getting, along with some very interesting footage related to some nighttime testing and shots of QA design for the top plate of the drone, have led us to a couple of different bits of information. Number one, there has continuously been a question regarding the focal lengths that would be available on this drone. Now, we know for sure that it will have a micro four thirds sensor as the main Hasselblad, that it will have 2 other zoom lenses attached, so it will have 3. We also know that it will have a very large and very mobile front imaging package. So now we have more footage of the software being used with this drone, and we can clearly see that the selection for the different cameras show a 1x, a 2.5x, and a 6x. So if we do some simple math, we know that there are a few different options here as far as the actual focal lengths that these cameras will support. First, if we start off with what we've traditionally had, which is a 24mm main camera, then that means that we're gonna have a 60mm zoom and a 144mm zoom at the 6x. And the other potential option is one that we've also heard leaked, and I've seen all 3 of these numbers, which is the 28, the 70, and the 168 or the 170. Now, one other potential would be a 20, a 50, and a 120, as the 50mm second lens has been something that we've heard a lot about, but I'll be honest, I don't think that that is the direction that they're gonna go, but I know that there are a lot of people that really like the 24mm aspect and they prefer a wider view. So I'm sure that opinions will be split on that. Another bit of information that we've been able to see in some of this footage and in the leaks that we've got is that the main 1x camera will be supporting an f2 aperture. Now, I've said this on the channel before, but now we have video evidence showing these settings on in the software. Additionally, we can see that the 2.5 lens can be set to f2.8, or at least I think that's what it says in the video. It could be f2.8, it could be f2.5. I'm not 100% sure. But the lower that number is, the higher the potential for them going with wider field of view lenses. And that's because the aperture is a measurement of the ratio between the diameter of the lens and its focal length. So the longer the focal length, like 20 versus 24 versus 28, or 50 versus 60 versus 70, to get that ratio down from f3.5 to f2.8 to f2.5 to f2 means that they have to make it physically larger. So that might actually be an argument towards wider field of views for them to be able to support larger apertures and better low light performance. Okay, the next thing that we can see in this footage is that in the main camera, shooting at 4K 30 at f2 at night, they are shooting in D-Log. Not D-Log M, but D-Log. Now, This isn't new for the Mavic series. The Mavic 3 Pro had D-Log on the main Hasselblad camera. But when they switch over to the 2.5 camera, we also see D-Log and not D-Log M. So why is that important? Well, it matters for two different reasons. One is a fact and one is a hope. The fact is that D-Log M is it is a log profile, but it doesn't pull the maximum amount of dynamic range off of the sensor. It's designed for you to be able to, in post, do adjustments, whereas D-Log gives you everything. Everything the sensor can give you, short of effectively being raw footage in terms of dynamic range. Just more in your post-processing workflow. And on the Mavic 3 Pro, you only get D-Log on the main sensor. We can now see that D-Log will be coming on the second sensor. We do not know if it will be coming on the 6x sensor. I've been talking about the fact that we're going to continue to get the 4/3 sensor in our main 20 megapixel Hasselblad sensor, and that I'm anticipating a 1/3 inch sensor, at least for the medium telephoto, but hopefully also for the long telephoto. The 12 megapixel 1/2 inch sensor that came on the Mavic 3 Pro was not something that you could really call a professional sensor. And again, my hope is that we see either a 1/1.3 or 1/1.7 inch sensor in the long 120, 145, or 168 millimeter sensor, whichever that one is. So that's the reality, practical application of D-Log versus D-Log M. Here's the other reason, is that when you look at the statistics of the Mavic 3 Pro, the main sensor, when compressing to H.265, will allow up to 200 megabits per second to come off the sensor, whereas the other two sensors, who only shoot in D-Log M or HLG, only go up to 160 megabits per second. My hope is that this means that in D-Log, at least, we will have the ability to shoot with higher throughput on the second sensor as well as on the main sensor. Whether they'll be the same or not is yet to be seen. But my hope is at least that we get that bump on that second sensor for the purpose of D-Log. The more data you have, the better you are in post-processing workflows. Okay, next I want to talk about codecs for just a minute, and then we'll get to the final feature of this drone, which is, I think, some of the coolest stuff we're going to hear. Looking at the Mavic 3 Pro, you obviously had log options, you had 8-bit, you had 10-bit, and if you had the Cine model, you also had ProRes options. And if you were shooting in ProRes on the Cine model, you had access to ProRes 422. And 422 is the measurement of the subsample, which is how compression algorithms take pixels and put them together to reduce the amount of information that they store on your SD card. It's a way to efficiently compress data. I will link to a fantastic video from Gerald Undone talking about chroma sampling. But basically, if you were shooting in 10-bit on the Mavic 3 Pro, you needed to be in ProRes to get 422. If you were in H.265, which is really your only option when shooting on the Pro model and not the Cine model, you were shooting in 420, which means you lose some of that detail information. So why does that matter on the Mavic 4? The Mavic 4, we have heard, will support not just ProRes 422, but 422HQ and 444XQ. Now, 444XQ or 4444XQ, because it actually has an alpha channel, and the non-XQ version of ProRes 444 support between 300 and 1700 megabits per second, right? It can fill up storage at over 700 gigabytes an hour. But the Mavic 4 Cine is going to be coming with a 2 terabyte SSD. But here's why I think that that's actually a cool idea and why I really hope that they go with this. I always thought that it was weird that on the Mavic 3, the 8-bit video modes, the non-log modes, were 420 compression in H.265. And the 10 bits were also 420 compression, whereas the ProRes was 422. If they bump ProRes up to 444, then my hope, my expectation would be that the 8-bit modes would still be 420, but that we would get an H.265 mode that would be a full 422 chroma subsample. Now, I'm not expecting 444 in H.265. I'm just saying I would love to see on the Pro model an H.265 10-bit 422 mode with the Cine model maybe having a 444 12-bit intra mode. We know that H.265 can handle it, and we know with newer processors and fast storage like the 512 gigabytes that they're going to be giving us on the Mavic 4 Pro, that would make sense. And combining that with the additional dynamic range that we would get with an updated sensor and log in both of these cameras, I think that would make this a super, super compelling product. I apologize for all that, but let's get to the final feature, which I think is super cool, which is the fact that because this thing is effectively a softball attached to the end of a Mavic, it can turn. We knew that this optical package was going to have the ability to go up and down a lot. And I'll be real honest, I thought to myself, okay, so that's for looking straight down and looking straight up? Is that something that we need to do? But now that we know that this thing can actually flip vertically, now we know that it can go full left to right in vertical mode, which means that you will be able to get super high resolution, super high dynamic range, 10-bit log footage, maybe 12-bit log footage with the Cine in vertical, so that you can then post-process it, compress it down to H.265, color grade it, and then export it to Instagram where it will be absolutely destroyed. I'm joking. It means that you get maximum versatility out of this product. And it's kind of an admission of the fact that we absolutely want horizontal, landscape, wide, cinematic, amazing footage for our shots to just blow everyone away. We also need to do social media marketing and content creation, and flipping the camera on its side allows us to do that without having to crop into the sensor and reduce resolution. Well, that's it for all the DJI news that we have today. Don't forget about my Instagram giveaway. I'm also doing memberships here on the channel. I've got 2 levels. One is $1 a month, one is $4 a month. It's super cheap. But with that, I will be giving away resources like LUTs, Lightroom presets, AI profiles, other resources that I've created for myself here as a photographer and a creator on YouTube, as well as doing lives and chats for members. So if you're interested in that, go ahead and check it out. If you're looking for a free way to support the channel, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. Hit the like button on this video if you thought that was interesting. That helps the algorithm know that I'm doing the right thing. You can also click on the links that I have down below to the products that I use every day here in the studio and when I'm out on location as a working photographer. Those are affiliate links, so that does support the channel. But that's it for me today. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.